Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth at craftsbyhappystamper.com. Today I'm sharing with you this fun bumblebee card that I made for the Can You Case It sketch challenge this week. There's a supply list and a link to my blog post as well as the current Can You Case It challenge in the description, so you can click on that if you're interested. I actually made two versions of this card. This one you see here, I used the Background Designer Series paper, and this one I used Schoolhouse Designer Series paper and mounted it on a basic gray card base instead of the crushed curry card base the other one's in. So let's get started. First I took my Playful Pals dies and I cut two vellum wings. And you have to cut the wings before you stamp them because the die only goes one way, so you have to flip the paper the opposite direction when you stamp the wings. So for the first card I showed you, that's the one I'm going to give you detailed information about. I cut a card base out of crushed curry, and that's just a traditional 5.5 by 8.5 card base scored at 4.25. And then I cut two pieces of 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 Whisper white cardstock. One is going to be for me to do my bumblebee on, and one is for the inside piece, for the inside sentiment. So I decided to use my Misty because sometimes these large solid stamps I have trouble getting them to stamp perfectly crispy the first time. So I thought that this would make it easy for me to re-stamp the stamp over and over again until I got the kind of coverage that I really wanted. And I'm using crushed curry here. The second card choice I showed you used Daffodil Delight, but this first one is all in crushed curry. You can see me inking it up really well. This is the first time I've inked this stamp too, and usually it doesn't stamp as well the very first time you stamp it. And you could see that after the first one I got a little white spot, and I decided to stamp it a couple other times. Because this is a clear stamp though, you don't really need a Misty or a Stamp-A-Majig. You can line it up pretty easily through the clear acrylic blocks that most people use to stamp with. But I decided I wanted this bumblebee body to be pretty solid and pretty dark. So I stamped this, I think, like 3 or 4 times before I got the kind of dark coverage that I really wanted. And, the Misty just takes all the thought out of it. You don't have to even think about lining it up properly because it's going to be properly lined up every time you do it. So I think this is my fourth time stamping it, and I decided that I liked the look of it at this point, which it just took me a little while, but I wanted it to be a pretty solid coverage. Then I decided it was time to stamp the face, and all these stamps are in the Playful Pal stamp set. So I gave him some what looked like eyeglasses, but I didn't do any like sides. So I stamped the eyeglasses to make sure that I put the eyes in the right spot so that they can go in the center of the eyeglasses first. And then I stamped the eyes, and then I stamped the mouth. And I did all of this in Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I didn't feel any need to change it up. So now I'm stamping the wings, and as I said, you have to die cut them first. This is vellum, and because it's vellum cardstock, it will fold, the flap will fold nicely, but if you try to fold it back and forth, it's just going to cut right off. So I use my embossing buddy, and then I'm using Versamark ink to stamp the wings on both of these, and then I will add Whisper White embossing powder and heat it with my embossing gun. These wings that I'm using are actually theoretically meant to be elephant ears, but I thought that they made perfect wings if you stamped them on vellum. There was no need to limit them to elephant ears. Just use a little bit of your imagination. So my bumblebee needed stripes, and you could just cut this out of black cardstock if you wanted, but I thought it was easier and it looked pretty nice to just use a ruler and my Stampin' Right basic black marker to draw lines. And I just kept going back and forth until I got the kind of thickness that I wanted, and then I moved my ruler up and repeated the process. So there's nothing fancy here. No, I'm just doing it by eye. And the fact that it's not perfect, I think, just gives it a little more character. I think it looks sweet. Some people's OCD might not allow them to not be perfectly lined up like that, but the ruler is straight enough so that my OCD doesn't go crazy, and I can get a pretty good looking bumblebee if you ask me. So before I attached the wings, I wanted to make sure I did everything that I wanted to do to this piece of paper. And at this point, I decided that I didn't like it as a solid sheet, that I wanted to cut it out. So I took the second largest framelit from, I think this is the Labels framelit series. I'm not exactly sure. I'll look it up and put it in the description. And cut it out with the second largest. And then I decided to cut off the extra at the bottom. And at this point, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the sentiment. I was designing this card as I went. So I decided that I liked the way it looked, but that it needed to have a mat behind it. So I took the largest of the Labels framelit and cut a basic black mat out of it. And then I glued my bumblebee onto the basic black mat, situating it exactly where I wanted it before I decided to cut off the extra basic black that's at the bottom. So this whole part here that I'm doing and cutting off, you don't have to do it all. I did this and then I realized that I liked the way it looked put back together, so you'll see me putting it back together in a little bit. And the second card I showed you at the beginning, I didn't cut it at the base at all. I just left it all as one piece together and stamped right on my sentiment right on it. But now I'm attaching the vellum, and I just use my liquid mono adhesive. That it dries clear, so there's no need worry about it showing. And I think my bumblebee looks happy and cute the way he is. And although I really like this, he needed to go in a card, and I still had to figure out how I wanted to get my sentiment. So I took a piece of crushed curry background designer series paper from the Regals pack and cut at 4 by 5 1/4. Well, actually, I cut it at 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, and I matted it to a basic black mat that was 4 by 5 1/4. And now I'm taking the Perfect Pairing stamp set, which is in the Celebration catalog, and I'm stamping Happy Day in the bottom portion of that white label that I had previously cut off. And I stamped it before I did anything because I thought I might want to make it a little bit smaller, but I wasn't sure how small I could make it and still fit the sentiment on it. So I stamped it as low as I thought I could go. And then I cut off the extra Whisper White. And now I'm seeing how it fits on the black. And I decided that it doesn't really fit properly without the rest of the black piece that I cut it away from. So I end up going back to my designer series paper and actually gluing it down instead of just testing how it looked. And now I'm trying to figure out how to put this together, because as I said, I'm designing this card as I go, so you're seeing that whole design process. And I decided that I kind of like there being a black strip separating the sentiment from the bumblebee, so I'm going to glue my sentiment to the very top of the black piece that I cut off. So the black piece is actually ends up being the exact same size it was before I cut it, once I glue it back together. So there was no need to cut it at all, basically, is what I'm getting at here. And yet, because I designed it as I went, I cut it to start off with. But once I glue it together, I don't think that you can really tell that I had separated it at all. So I'm just gluing the bumblebee to the top part, and then I'm going to glue the bottom of the black label directly below the spot that I had originally cut it off. So if you were going to make this card, I recommend not cutting the black at all because there's no need. But I do like the stripe in the middle, and I'll show you the second card I showed you. I kept it all one piece and did not cut it at all, and I used the and many more sentiment to write Celebrate instead of Happy Day. So it's a very similar card, but I think it has a very different look, and I think it's a little easier if you don't cut the labels. So I'm just matting this, gluing the front panel onto the crushed curry card base, and then I'm stamping You Did It just in Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I'm just testing on the right side to make sure I have the stamp straight, because this is a red rubber mount, clear mount stamp, so I can't see through it to make sure it's straight. So I'm practicing on the right before I stamped it, and then I attached snail to it in order to attach it to the inside. And you can see me using my tweezers here. My cat was trying to craft with me, and he left a hair, so I had to get rid of that hair off of the glue. But we all make mistakes, right? So now I'm just attaching it, trying to center it in the inside of my card base. And that's it. So the card was relatively quick to make, and you could certainly mass produce this pretty easily. And this is the second card that I showed you at the beginning, which uses a basic gray card base. And I use, as I said, I use the Schoolhouse Designer Series paper that is in Daffodil Delight. So I made my Bumblebee also in Daffodil Delight. And the sentiment Celebrate is from the And Many More sentiment. Uh, and Many More stamp set. So, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this card today. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Don't forget that all the details are in the description. And if you want to check on my blog post, feel free to click on that link and follow me on my blog as well. Thanks. Bye.